I appreciate your patience, and the networking is going on. That's fantastic, because that is what we really are all about here, is you getting to know the other business owners in the area. My name is Rick Allen. I'm the facilitator of a group that meets here every single Monday at 11:30. What we typically do is like a normal networking group. I like to tell people that when you're part of what we call Ahwatukee Power Partners, when you look around the room, you're looking at your sales staff. Your job in being here is to train your sales staff. So when you get up and do that 30-second commercial, that's what you're doing. You're training other people to know what you do, so that when they're out and about and they happen to meet somebody, hi, Rick, oh, really? You're looking for a realtor? Oh, good. I can introduce you to one. I can introduce you to a mortgage person, and so forth. I can introduce you to somebody who takes care of websites and marketing, things of that nature. So you've got an elderly parent that you need help for. Hey, guess what? I know somebody. So that's what we do here on a regular basis. But on the fourth Monday of each month, we like to do something a little more special. We have a speaker come in to talk about some area of business that is relative to everybody that's in business. And we've had people come and talk about how to get your site onto Facebook, how to get it onto Google, how to get it on Google Maps and Apple Maps and so forth. And we post all of those in a very special place. You may have heard of it. It's called YouTube. And if you go to YouTube and look for @ Chamber, you will find the Chamber's channel. And all of the sessions that we do are posted there after the fact. So today we are very, very fortunate to have a speaker, and I'm going to introduce him to you in just a second. But first, I would definitely like him to know who else is in the room. So if you would, give us not the full 30-second commercial, but who you are and what you do, so he knows what your business is. It'll become apparent in a moment when I introduce him, why he needs to know what business you're in and what's represented here in the room. So Scot Mussi is with us today, and Scot is the Executive Director of the Arizona Liberty Network, as well as Policy Leader for the Arizona Free Enterprise Club. Very, very involved in things like legislature. And as business owners, what we all know is that laws don't stay static. They change from time to time, like every few years. And it's a good idea as business owners. How many of those laws are we obligated to comply with? All of them, yes. So it's a good idea to know what the current laws are that we have to comply with, and what things are going through the legislature that we might want to see if we can kind of do one of those little things where we say, don't vote for that, vote for that. So it's very, very important to keep up with those things. So Scot is going to be talking to us about that today, and then a Q&A session afterwards. So with no further ado, I'll give you Scot.
Thank you. I'll come on up.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I've been involved in Arizona politics and policy for about 20 years, actually since I graduated from Arizona State University. I'm actually an Arizona native. Was born in the west part of town, in the Maryvale area, but born in the west part of town, but actually when I was in the third grade, moved out to the Ahwatukee area. I lived out here, graduated from Desert Vista in '99. And so I'm actually very familiar with the area. My first job was actually doing penny savers and putting those out. But my second job, real job I actually got, was at I think it's the J.C. Penney now, but at the time it was a Kmart. I don't know if anybody remembers that. Yeah. That used to be a Kmart. I worked at that Kmart. I made more than minimum wage. I made $5.50 an hour, which I thought I was beating. At the time, minimum wage was $5.15, but I made $5.50 an hour working there. I was hired. My job title was porter. I didn't know what a porter was. It turned out what a porter was the guy that went out in the summertime to get shopping carts and cleaned up things out of the bathroom that nobody else wanted to clean up. And that was a porter. Anyway, so I worked over there, but grew up here. So I'm very familiar with the area out here. Heck, when we first moved out here, 48th Street was a dirt road. It was a dirt road out here. So anyways,
been working in the political scene now for about 20 years and been running this organization for about 10. And so we are a nonprofit, but a lot of the work we do is what we're considered what's called kind of like a political policy nonprofit that operates in this world. And so economic and fiscal policy are some of our top issues that we've worked on over the years. Been very proud to have worked on a lot of big issues here in Arizona, things to help out taxpayers in Arizona, help out small business. That's primarily our focus. One of our big things is that we want to do policy in Arizona that is good for everyone. It doesn't pick winners and losers. We're trying to do everything we can to benefit all small business owners, all entrepreneurs, all taxpayers here in the state. And so over the years, those are the type of policies we fight for, and a lot of times they're the type of policies that we fight against here in Arizona. So I would say the last couple years have been an interesting endeavor here in the state of Arizona, a lot of interesting fights. We now have divided government, so with a Democrat governor and a Republican legislature, the dynamics are a little bit different than they have been historically, where we've had usually Republican control of the legislature and the governor's office. But with that, creates new dynamics that we've had to navigate as an organization. One of our big things is we just want to make sure that through that dynamic of having divided government, that we're not seeing especially a lot of bad policy getting through that could be damaging to small business. We're adamantly opposed to any sort of tax increases in this environment, especially with the inflationary environment that we are experiencing in the last couple of years. So making sure that we're not raising taxes, and that we're still looking at doing things to provide, if possible, additional relief for small business and for entrepreneurs in the state. And so I will say this legislative session, if I had to do a good, bad, and ugly, I'd say the good news is right now, when it comes to any sort of big picture type of policy that's negatively impacting the business community here in Arizona, we have not seen anything come across that we've seen that we would say this is detrimental, we need to oppose, or if it's been out there, has been stopped early on in the legislative process. There's a few things kind of floating out there right now that we may not love, and there might be things here that people here that know about that maybe you don't like so much, but given, I would say, the potential for really bad things happening, the good news is there's not a lot of that going on right now. So on the flip side, on the positive front, as far as any sort of good economic fiscal policy, we did have a victory on our end about 10 days ago. For the last few years, we've been working on this issue dealing with vehicle mileage taxes. We've seen this proliferation of this effort to go out and say, hey, we're going to create this new program of going out and want to tax people by the mile or monitor their driving. California has been looking at doing this for the last several years. Our big issue with that, among others, is that this isn't, it's often framed as, oh, we'll tax you by the mile and we'll replace it with the gas tax. Yet, what never seems to happen is the gas tax never seems to go away. It always seems to be, we're going to put the vehicle miles tax on top of the gas tax. It's also pitched as an idea of, oh, we're going to do this because, we're losing revenues associated with the gas tax, and so let's do a vehicle miles tax. And again, the gas tax never seems to go away. And then when they talk about this vehicle miles tax, it always seems to be not just done with the idea of getting revenue, but they want to change people's behavior. Because they're like, oh yeah, we got to find this new revenue. And then they spend all this time talking about how we got to start reducing people's vehicle miles traveled. And we just don't believe it's the government's business to start determining how many miles people are driving. Obviously if you drive more, you're going to pay more in fuel taxes, but we shouldn't have a special surcharge that if you buy that extra gallon each month that you get charged an extra amount or something, or based on the type of vehicle you drive. And they seem to want to use the vehicle miles tax to do that. They want to change people's behavior, both on the type of cars they're driving or do surcharges based on how many miles they're driving, because they just want to reduce people's ability to move around. We're against it. So we're happy to say that about 10 days ago, the legislature referred to the ballot a measure to the voters of Arizona, to put in our Constitution, a prohibition on a vehicle miles tax, or a prohibition on being able to monitor or limit or tax your vehicle miles traveled. So in 2026, voters will have the opportunity to do that. We think it's a good idea. And we're hoping that voters will pass that on the ballot in 2026. So that's the good. The bad, and also I'll kind of say the ugly right now, because it's gotten kind of ugly the last week. Anybody that's been seeing what's being written in the paper or the media's been covering it is that there's a big ugly budget fight right now. It seems like everybody's kind of fighting with everybody. The House and the Senate were able to agree on a framework for a state budget, which by June 30th in Arizona has to be passed. Otherwise, the existing budget runs out, and you got the potential of a budget shutdown, or a government shutdown. The House and the Senate historically have been able to at least come to a general understanding of a framework of the budget. This year, that did not happen. Instead, what ended up happening is the Senate ended up negotiating with the governor. They ended up coming to a tentative budget agreement without discussing with the House. Simultaneously, the House came up with their own budget. And then about a week and a half ago, voted out their own budget. Last week, the Senate passed out their budget on interesting divided votes. The Republicans, a majority of the Republicans in the body in the Senate voted for it, but not a majority of the Democrats in the body. There's Democrats that voted for it, but not a majority of it. So that got passed out, and now after that happened late last week, it's just been, I would say, a war of words on social media between the House and the Senate about, whose budget's better, and also what are the next steps going to be. And as I stand here today, I don't know what the outcome is going to be here on this. Our read on both budgets is that the House budget spent a little bit less, and there was some various, I would say, policy items that were not budget related that we did like that the House was considering, and so we did like those elements of it. The Senate budget did spend more, spent a little bit more money. Again, didn't include a bunch of negative policy that we're going to dislike. And so from our organization perspective, we didn't come out against either of the budgets. We were just highlighting what we liked or disliked about each particular package. But I have no idea where this is going to end up. The war of words have not stopped. They're still talking to each other, but they're not close to any sort of budget agreement. My guess at this point, that unless something, I would say, breaks between some of the rank and file, some of the individual members, there's 60 members in the House, 30 in the Senate, unless something kind of changes in that dynamic, I think there's a very good chance this thing's going to go up until June 30th to reach some sort of budget agreement. But just, I would say, by and large, a very contentious environment, one that I have never seen before. I've never seen a situation where the two chambers were at loggerheads like the way they are now, and a situation where the governor's office, as the highest-ranking Democrat in the state of Arizona, she doesn't even have unanimity among her Democrats. You don't see a lot of Democrats right now in the bodies openly attacking her or publicly coming out and attacking her, but the fact that there wasn't unanimous support among the Democrats in the Senate was kind of, was a little bit surprising from our perspective, because normally the highest ranking official in that body will get at minimum a majority of their caucus, a majority of the Democrats, or if it was a Republican governor, Doug Ducey never had a budget in his 8 years ever come out that didn't have a majority support, a majority of the Republicans in each body support it. So, yeah, there's a little bit of contention. Again, looking at both budgets, nothing in there at first blush that we saw from a tax policy. There's no tax increases in there. From a policy or an impact on small business and entrepreneurs, nothing in the budget that really caught our attention. We'd love to hear from people here if you guys saw anything that caught your attention over the weekend, but nothing from our perspective that we thought was detrimental, that outright needed to be opposed. So right now, I'd say that's kind of the good, bad, and the ugly of kind of where we stand. There's still some other outstanding bills that are out there, legislation, still some other referrals that are out there, some other things that may go to the voters to potentially vote on in 2026. But right now, all eyes are on the budget and where this goes. And it's our hope, and one of our big things that we stress, and have been stressing with leadership in both the House and the Senate, is Try to do everything you can to unify on this and come together with a cohesive solution. And number two, do no harm. Let's just not do any harm. People have already suffered enough. Don't make them suffer more. Don't cut bad deals just to go chase a vote. And so if that changes and we start seeing bad policy getting rolled into the budget, we'll probably become more vocal against this thing. And so anyways, I'd be happy to answer any questions, either about the budget and what's going on legislatively, any particular bill that maybe is catching somebody's attention that we may have some insight on. I'd be happy to inquire about that. Yes?
I have two questions. You talked a lot about like not increasing taxes and some of the legislatures, like with the inflation and all that stuff, looking for revenue avenues for revenue, like the mileage tax and stuff like that. Is there any of them out there that are saying, okay, maybe we need to cut spending? Let's look at the spending. Maybe let's quit taxing everybody and let's look at the spending and see if we can't get some reduction in that.
Yes.
Having us pay more money?
There is. And that was part of what came out of the House and what some of the discontent there is that wasn't part of the discussion and the negotiations between the bodies. In fact, there's an effort right now in the House to move an additional bill to do some additional cuts. That's been part of the discussion. And make no mistake, the state of Arizona does not have a revenue problem. In fact, the state budget over the last 5 years has grown by over 50%. It's grown way past the rate of population plus inflation. We had about a $10 billion budget in 2020. This budget that's being considered right now is, depending on which one you look at, the House or the Senate, is anywhere from 16.5 to the low $17.3 billion. So again, in 5 years, huge growth in the size of the state budget. In fact, several years ago, one of the things that, this was back in 2019 and 2020, that we were frustrated about was all the efforts to want to raise taxes when in reality taxes were getting raised. I don't know if anybody's noticed, but the last few years, anybody bought anything online and you pay a tax now? Pay a tax on that, on those online purchases? Well, that didn't exist 6 years ago. We were down at the Capitol on this, and there was this effort to want to tax online sales, and we said, okay, we'll have a discussion about taxing online sales, but if you're going to do that, there needs to be equal cuts. In fact, our preference was not just equal cuts, but we should have an additional tax cut to go on top of it. Well, in that fight, the people pushing it were going around and telling people that, oh, it's only going to be an additional amount of revenue for state and local government of about $150 million. And we were like, that's way low. That's way low. You have to go lower than this. And we need to build in mechanisms if you're going to do this to ensure that if it is higher than that, that we see additional tax relief. We lost that fight. We didn't win that fight. They started taxing online sales. Anybody want to guess how much this last year state and local governments collected in online sales?
$1 billion.
I wish it was only triple.
$1 billion.
Over $1 billion.
Oh, wow.
New revenue, state and local governments, over $1 billion in additional revenue being collected.
Well, yeah, everybody switched to buying online.
It was obvious. I mean, if anybody with a kid under the age of 25 5 years ago knew that. I mean, it was just the next generation of people that were coming into the market, getting jobs, were going to be buying all this stuff. So over $1 billion new. They don't count that though. It's always, well, that's just forgotten. That never happened. And then they'll say we're starved for revenue and they don't want to cut. And so the good news is that the following year we were successful in shepherding it through the substantial reductions in our income taxes. We got our income tax rate down to a flat 2.5%. We now, of the states that have an income tax, have the lowest income tax in the country. We would love to get it lower. One of our goals as an organization is that there are 9 states without an income tax. There's no reason that we couldn't look at being the 10th. And looking back, seeing how we've grown our budget from $10 billion to $17 billion, if we had only grown it from $10 billion to $12.5 billion, we could have almost got rid of the income tax. If we had just grown by population and inflation, we would have been able to almost just get rid of our income tax entirely, given all the revenue growth over the last several years in our state budget. So yes, there are efforts. Our efforts are to push on that too, to make sure that people aren't getting nickel and dimed on this, that we're not just bloating our budgets. This year, I think there's some efforts to do that. Conversely, I would say our governor right now, she actually proposed a budget that spent well over $18 billion. So you have that dynamic. You do have to negotiate with the people that are there. And right now, our governor, Katie Hobbs, the Democrat, wants to spend a lot more money, and she did want to do a tax increase. All that's kind of been shelved in these negotiations as far as the tax hike goes, but the final spending level has not been figured out yet. Yes?
So when you're looking at, first I'll say thanks for getting that ballot referendum, because I think every one of us in this room, as entrepreneurs, we're essentially salespeople.
Mm-hmm.
And every single one of us has to drive to do what we do. And I think they forget about that. And so hopefully when you're doing your messaging campaign, you can have something that says, everything you buy, everything you need, somehow gets delivered by vehicle miles. Because the groceries that you get, everything. I think we all get that. But John,
one of our biggest supporters on this were the truckers. They were extremely supportive because they've seen these efforts in other states. And anybody watch what happened with the congestion pricing in New York? They're trying to do which this would prevent that from happening in Arizona. They wouldn't be able to do this type of pseudo congestion pricing maneuver. But even on that one was really sinister because it was New York City was basically wanted to stick it to the people in New Jersey because they knew all the people that were living in New Jersey because they can't afford to live in New York because they priced people out of existence. And so people have to live in New Jersey. And then they're like, okay, we'll just get you that way coming in to try to work back in New York City. Thankfully, the city of Phoenix isn't like right next to California. That would be I can only imagine what sinister ideas California would want to come up with to get us, people coming in and out. Anyway, so big supporters on it, and we're going to run a very active campaign on this to support it, and we'll probably have like yard signs. So if people want a yes on yard sign, we call it the Freedom to Move. Has been the campaign that we've had behind it, Freedom to Move. But there'll be a yes on. We don't have the ballot number yet, but once we do, there'll be signs and everything else we'll want to distribute.
And we'll get those distributed. The other question I had is relative to the budget. We were talking about the expansions that people wanted, and obviously that affects all of us in our tax dollars. And wondering if either of the sides, House or Senate, if any of them are addressing the $339 million that was spent without it being part of the budget that the governor spent on.
Oh, the Developmental Disabled program?
How that's being worked in, and then also, because my understanding is that they're, as full disclosure, my daughter is a mental health rehab, counselor and mental health, and they've just been given a warning, and I know it's political, but they've just been told, start thinking about if we're gonna have to lay somebody off, who it would be, and hopefully you guys are kind of saying, wait a minute, let's focus on what and not who, because one of the things, for instance, that the governor's office did was they remodeled the DES mental health offices to make them more able to have more people in. They took out the offices and put in cubicles, which is completely idiotic, because with HIPAA, you can't interview people in cubicles, they have to have privacy. So now some of those things they'll have to figure out how to refund and put it back to what was destroyed. Is there any kind of accountability being included in the budget and any kind of checks and balances so that somebody on the 9th floor can't just say, hey, we think this would be pretty, and not talk to the offices about functionality?
On that particular issue, that's not one just even related to that. That's across the board, and so that's always an ongoing, tug of war between the legislative and the executive branch, and making sure, however they appropriate funds, that they put appropriate guardrails on how it's going to get spent. So even in that way, what you witnessed, that type of activity occurs in a lot of other areas too. So it's an on.
Side have more better guardrails if we
Well, that's something that the legislature themselves have to make sure that the guardrails, that consistently, as they're going through and they're negotiating a budget, that they're putting those guardrails in to protect it. On the developmentally disabled issue, both budgets largely included funding to continue things as they were based on the deal or the legislation that was passed in April. One of the
That only went to K-12 and K-12, and the problem is that a lot of them are going to need care going on.
Yeah, and so
then that comes under DES.
yeah,
and
and
do away with the Department of Education federally, then somehow that's going to have to get, those funds will come back to the states, or so that it's going to have to get.
yeah, this budget doesn't. I don't think that this budget doesn't specifically, I think, address anything related to the actions being taken at the federal level. Some of that is just because it's too hard or too early to know how to basically adjust to that. So that right now, too early to say on that. On what happened with Katie Hobbs and the funds that she had appropriated, and anybody that wasn't familiar with what transpired over the last year is that it came out in January that all of a sudden we had a budget shortfall associated with the developmentally disabled program, and at first nobody knew how that happened. It was just the executive branch was saying we had this shortfall. It turned out there was a COVID era program. It was created under President Biden and the Democrat-controlled Congress at the time, that created this new program for parents to provide additional or provide assistance to their developmentally disabled child, because a lot of it was remote and they couldn't go in person to do that. And so they were able to provide those services and actually receive compensation for being able to provide those services for the developmentally disabled child. Well, that program at the federal level was funded by the feds too. So a lot of states did it. And didn't have to worry too much about how that program was particularly funded. Well, the funding was getting cut off by Congress and by the legislature. It was only temporary. It was getting cut off. And so in the last 18 months, every state has had to figure out what they were going to do with that program. And we found out a lot of this after the fact, because this wasn't an issue that our organization was really involved with. Turned out other states each state dealt with it a little bit differently. Some states just decided to take it over and fund it. Some states just eliminated it. They got rid of it. They said it was a temporary program, and they eliminated it. Then some other states, they did some sort of reform process with it, where they incorporated some elements of it, allowing for parent caregivers, but they did it as holistically as part of our program. Well, we didn't do any of those things. What ended up happening was our legislature and the governor actually agreed to this, that the funding ended, and the funding ended last year. And so basically the funding was going to come to an end. She didn't do that. She just kept appropriating funds for that program, even though it wasn't included in last year's budget. Well, the result of that was that she was pulling the money out of the original bucket for developmentally stable children that every kid in that program was relying on, and so the entire program was going to go bankrupt. Not just the program that was no longer funded, but the entire thing. And so that's what was going on this session. The legislature passed what I would call kind of a, semi-reforms, patchwork, or or a Band-Aid legislation to deal with it, that provided funding for those parents that were providing some services to the developmentally disabled child, with a couple of little reforms that went along with it. But big picture, I don't think it really resolved the question on what's going to happen, kind of kicked the can down the road. My guess is that in this budget, at least with the original budgets that came out, is that largely the program's still getting funded. But at some point, they're going to have to come back and talk about some sort of holistic reform. Because big picture, again, and we're not an expert in this policy area, but if they believe that it's better to provide, or for parents that they can provide some of these services and do a better job than some of the existing programs, or there's a better way to complement it, then that discussion needs to happen. That never really did happen because it was in the middle of a legislative fight. But just layering a program on top of it and just providing funding without answering those questions, we don't believe was the right solution either. So, that's a great answer to your question. My feeling is all this is going to get kicked past this budget. They're going to probably provide some more funding for it. It's going to get kicked past it, and it'll spill into next year, and then likely be part of a discussion post 26, depending on whether or not Hobbs is reelected or we have a new governor. So, yes.
So going back to the tax on the mileage,
Mhm.
so how are they gonna, we're a very transient state. So we have a lot of visitors come to the Grand Canyon, they come down, they fly into Phoenix and they're going to or Vegas and they're driving here or flying out of here. How are they gonna implement that? Because I mean, like what said that there's a lot of salespeople, but I mean, like, I moved here in '94. My kids all went to Gilbert High, and Gilbert's every city seems to be a destination almost now within the small suburbs. And people do still drive a lot. I drive a lot, and most people in sales do drive a lot. And we're so far spread out. Yeah, I used to work downtown. I lived in Gilbert. So I mean, like, that was before the freeways were what they are now, was quite the trek. So how are they justifying that? I mean, I know that you kind of answered that. I mean, it just seems like, okay, so we've got people from, what do they call those, snowbirds that come here, and they're still here. And we've got people with investment properties here from California. How are they going to justify that?
I think excellent question, and we have those questions every time this gets brought up as an idea to implement. That this is, for a variety of reasons, is going to be, in some respects, unworkable. In other respects, will disproportionately punish one person or one resident or one snowboard or whoever it is more than others, depending on how you're going to even implement the dang thing. And so California, they went through the whole thing because San Diego was going to do this. They were going to do a vehicle miles tax in San Diego. What ends up happening is you start setting up, there's different ways they try to go about it. One is they try to set up basically like they do with toll booths. It's basically, it's a fancy way of saying you're going to implement a toll. But rather than a toll of like saying you're going to use this road, it's a toll based on how many miles you drive.
So that brings a lot of scams. I have a house in Dallas.
Oh, you
And I grew up there. And so when my dad died, he gave me the pass to take out the house, right? There's toll booths everywhere. I mean, I just flew in and got a rental car, and the toll booth was only less than $3, but the taxes, I mean, the surcharges were more. I'm just saying, what's going to happen? It's a huge deterrent. Now, I don't want to live in Dallas because of that, because I never know where I'm going anymore. And I just find it really ridiculous and limiting.
It's what it will be. It will be limiting.
People are going to move out of here, where it's going to deter people from moving in here, or people in Texas. We have no, they have no income tax, right? But everybody gripes about the house taxes. Now I know why. I own a house. And because, my dad was grandfathered in and paid nothing, but I get it. And so that's what's going to happen here. I mean, they might as well just put a ticker tape in the roof.
Yeah, and this is and just on that point, on related to this, is that we would be in these discussions about it. One on the implementation, others, but the part that really clinched it for us and why this was so important, why we should try to outlaw this and do a constitutional prohibition, is that the advocates for it often just didn't even hide what their ambition was, which is they just thought people drove too much and people need to drive less. And terms that they would use that I was like, I can't believe they would even use these terms because I think they're so bad that gives a negative connotation. But they would go around and be like, we need to implement road diets. Has anybody here ever heard of a road diet before? Okay, if you'd asked me that 2 years ago, I'm like, what's a road diet? What are you talking about? A road diet is that they believe people drive too much, and so they want to spend funds to actually narrow roads, so take 4-lane roads down to 2-lane roads, because we got to put people on a diet because they're driving too much. And that's built into transportation plans because the federal government's providing funding to cities that implement road diets. And I was like, well, if I was actually like supportive of this, which I'm not, the last thing I would call it is a road diet. I just find that so offensive, but that's what they call it. They want to put people on road diets. They're driving too much.
They don't realize that our tourism is part of the makeup of Arizona. Like, the streets are horrible in Dallas. They're horrible. I know the climate's different, but they don't think about, us not having tolls or us not having these limitations. The 10 is a major thoroughfare across the nation. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, well, Well, Dallas, I mean, even with Dallas, I don't know about Dallas. I mean, in the summertime when it's 95 with like 80% humidity, I don't know. But even here, this is the joke I'd always tell about this. It's just, they do this, they want to go out, they're like, we got to get people out of their cars. Like Tucson, they did this whole plan. They put their whole transportation plan was built around this idea that half the people in Tucson by 2040 would no longer be using their car, and they'll get around with walking, biking, or using transit. And it's just loud. I'd be like, yes, because you know what? This last week when it was 115 degrees outside, I'm sure everybody would love to go outside and stand on Ray Road and wait for a bus. And they'd be so excited for that. It's not anybody that advocates for this, either they have a different world, they either don't live here or they have such a worldview. I think it's just dangerous. The idea of saying that seniors need to go outside and wait for transit. I mean, there's a reason we have dial right go pick. That's not feasible. You're not going to have people picking them, a transit system that's picking people outside their homes. They're going to have to walk somewhere to get there. And telling people in this heat to walk a quarter mile and go hang out and wait for transit is just insane. It's why we oppose. It's why transportation policy is something we've got more and more involved with, because we're just big advocates that the purpose of good transportation policy is making it as easy and affordable for people to get around as possible. That should be all transportation should be based on that simple premise, and anything that deviates from that premise or is geared towards saying that the road should be as wide as the sidewalks, which is one of the things that a lot of people advocating for the vehicle miles tax wants. They want sidewalks that are as wide as roads because they want all these people out there walking on sidewalks. Doesn't work for Arizona. Just doesn't work for Arizona.
Well, it doesn't work for business, and since we're a business organization, I'll say it doesn't work for business people at all. It's like, I do employee benefits. When I do an enrollment meeting, I have to bring all my brochures. I was just in Iowa, and on my way back, my 50-pound briefcase lifting it, I managed to tear my bicep tendon, dislocate my shoulder, tear my rotator cuff tendon. But even if I hadn't done that, trying to take 50 pounds worth of brochures on a bus and get it up the steps, it's not feasible. I mean, if you take somebody that's taking care of seniors, and they may have oxygen, and they may have boxes of diapers, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if you're doing hospice or anything you're doing, you have things that you have to get to the locations of the people that you serve, and all of us serve people. And so if you're saying, okay, you're going to take the bus, how much can you carry? How many boxes of diapers can I carry safely while going up the steps of a bus? And then with oxygen tanks, and then maybe some meds that can't handle heat, et cetera. And they're not thinking it through. So I think all of that has to be part of the campaign to stop this. And hopefully we can have a coalition with a lot of different nonprofits that serve people as well. Because I think it's going to be
Last one.
The safety aspect. We're not China, so we don't have the massive transportation that they have. And I was real excited to get the light rail. I rode it once. After the elements on that, I was done. It's not safe for the average individual. With all there's elements on there that a lot of people don't like.
Yeah, I can go on and on about light rail and to me, and there's multiple things about. Probably the biggest frustration thing with light rail is just simply the cost. It's now costing nearly $300 million per mile to build light rail. To give you a perspective, the Loop 202 that goes around South Mountain that was completed 5 years ago, that cost around $85 million a mile. So you built an 8-lane new freeway for a third of the cost to build the third of the cost per mile than it is to build light rail, and that doesn't get into everything else. To me, it's more so you want to help if there are people that need help, that need to be able to get around, that don't have a vehicle. Which at this point, one of the most interesting things now is that given with Uber and other things to get around, is that people have a lot of options. But even low-income individuals, there's a lot better ways to do it. We can serve the population that maybe needs help getting around in very effective ways that don't involve spending $300 million a mile.
That's another thing, though. They would tax ride-sharing companies, and then the price of that would go up exponentially as well.
Ride sharing, and also dial-a-ride. From an organization, but did a lot of research on this. Those have been, we would consider, two of the more effective programs, or at least that are more direct and effective at serving the stated purpose of what you want to accomplish. And those are generally the least liked by advocates of a lot of these policies, doing mileage taxes and others. They don't like them as much. They consider them as like nuisances. We're always like, well, do dial-a-ride. We're okay with that. Serve dial-a-ride. But you know, I don't know. I don't get it. I'm like, those are the programs that actually do the best. We should be focusing on those. But those a lot of times get secondary consideration compared to, like, for example, building a new light rail line.
Interesting fact that you might add to your repertoire as well. Tempe City Council was having a debate on the streetcar to nowhere a number of years back, and one of the council members, I can't think of what his name was at this point, but he moved out of the country afterwards, but kind of got disgusted with everything. But at any rate, he did the math at that time, and it was about a tenth of the cost if the city were to just give people vouchers for Uber, dial-a-ride, or whatever, than what it was going to be to build that streetcar to nowhere.
Yeah, and now, I mean, the streetcar, unless something's changed in the last year, they're not charging people to ride it, which we think is which is a huge mistake, because it only reduces the safety on them, because you will attract a criminal element. But then it gets into the obvious question of, if this thing's so popular, why do you have to give it away for free? And if we're not charging for it, how are we recouping costs on it? What are the operation and maintenance associated with it? And lastly, on the transit stuff, still, since pre-pandemic, less than half the people that were riding transit prior to the pandemic are riding today. Like, there's been more than a 50% drop off of ridership, and it hasn't recovered, and for a variety of reasons, which I can go on and on about. But thank you so much for giving me the time to talk today. Appreciate it.
One more quick
Yes.
thing, can you hit on personal property tax for businesses? Did that pass?
That personal property tax. Oh yes, I should have. That's a great one. I can't believe I forgot about that. That's one of the best parts. That actually is a good thing. That was in both versions of the budget. Was an increase in the exemption for the personal property tax up to $500,000. A couple of years ago, we actually were working with one of the lawmakers on a referral that he got on the ballot to deal with this, because we actually had a problem in our Constitution. It was how it was written prevented the legislature from raising the exemption for the personal property tax for small business. Well, that impediment was removed, and so now the legislature can do it. And so there's currently a proposal, it's in both budgets, to raise that exemption up to $500,000 for small business on their personal property that they have. That's a very big win, good policy. We hate the personal property tax, such a nuisance for businesses to manage. We believe it just needs to get rid of. We need to get rid of it entirely, but that is in both budget proposals. So thank you, everybody.
Scott, how can we get a hold of you?
Oh,
Or
yeah.
I'm involved in your organization?
Yeah, if you wanted to get involved, you can visit our website. It's www.azfree.org. There you can just sign up. You can get our content and our newsletters if you want to sign up there. You'll see that in addition to economic and fiscal policy, we have gotten involved in a lot of other issue baskets over the years. A lot of things that we think are critically important to keeping our state prosperous. In fact, one of our taglines is "Keep AZ Free." That's one of our big taglines. Our other one is "Don't California my Arizona." "Don't CA my AZ" is one of our taglines we use as well too, highlighting crazy policies from California we shouldn't be doing here. So go to azfree.org. You can sign up there, get our newsletters. We also have a Grassroots network that assists us in a lot of our activities here in Arizona. So thank you so much.
And I will. Thank you very much. I'll save hotline syndrome.
Oh,
There you go. So now you're free to say anything you want.
Hi there, this is Rick Allen, a member of the Ahwatukee Chamber of Commerce and facilitator for the networking group called Ahwatukee Power Partners. We meet on Mondays at the Native Grill and Wings at 11:30 a.m. for an hour every Monday, other than when it conflicts with a holiday, of course, and we would love to have you come out and check us out. We are a one-person per profession networking organization, and if you enjoyed the content that you saw here today, consider subscribing to the channel and hit the notification bell so you get notified when we upload additional content. On the fourth Monday of each month, typically, we hold something called Idea Factory, which is what you just watched. And that's where we take a particular subject of interest to business owners to give them an opportunity to hear from experts in that particular field. So if you liked what you saw, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, forward it to others, give us comments. What did you like best about the video that you saw? What would you like to see next? We're looking forward to hearing from you. Rick Allen, member of the Ahwatukee Chamber of Commerce and facilitator for the Ahwatukee Power Partners. We'll see you real soon.